Hey everyone, welcome into today's webinar. My name's Nick Child, and I am the Director of Client Experience here. Really excited to have you guys and to talk a little bit about your federal employee benefits. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about federal disability retirement in 2023. So we're going to look at last year, we're going to look at the upcoming year and what you can expect and know what to plan for. So one other thing I want to mention before we get started is that if you are watching this video on YouTube, we do answer questions that are left in the comment section. So make sure if you have any that pop up during the webinar that you leave your question below and we will try to get to it as quickly as we can. Also want to mention our disclaimer here that this webinar is just for educational purposes. This is not intended to be legal advice, so we are just trying to help you understand your benefits and get a little more information so that you can make the best decisions moving forward. All right, so let's get into the webinar. We're going to be talking about federal disability retirement in 2023. I'm here with Anna Barnes, who is our Director of Organizational Development. You'll also see that little FRC next to her name. That means she's a federal retirement consultant. She's certified in that. So Anna, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Nick. I'm so happy to be here to talk about this with you today. I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2023 holds for disability retirement.
So Anna is definitely one of the people you want to hear from. She's been with Harris Federal for over 10 years now. She's been in many different roles here because of her vast knowledge of federal disability retirement. She's in charge of all the training here at Harris Federal. So I'm really excited to have her just go over this topic with you today. Okay, so what we're going to discuss in this webinar is what we saw happen over the last year in 2022, just the way the benefit evolved and we saw some things change. But we also want to talk about what you can expect coming into this year, especially if you're thinking about applying in 2023, and how you can get approved for federal disability retirement. So Anna, let's talk about what happened in 2022. This is our 2022 recap. So let's start off with the OPM stats.
Sure. So last year, OPM had about 100,000 retirement applications submitted, which is a lot. The largest amount of applications were submitted in January at around 13,000, with the fewest in December around 5,000. Just to be clear, these are all retirement applications. So these include disability retirement applications, but this is every federal employee who submitted an application in 2022. OPM doesn't release statistics regarding disability retirement specifically, so we kind of have to take the total statistics and take a look at those in comparison to disability retirement.
Yeah, so you can see this is a really big number, and to think that they're processing all of these claims and what that might mean for processing times and backlogs and all that good stuff. So nothing really new here. This is, similar information to every year, but just so that everybody can see kind of the scale that the OPM is working on. Right here, we want to talk about a trend that we saw pop up in 2022, which is we saw an increase in denials. Can you talk about that a little, Anna?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely in 2022, there was an uptick in denials at the initial and reconsideration level at OPM. OPM did a little restructuring in the last couple of years, and they have actually changed the type of position that's making decisions on these cases. And so the medical specialists that are making decisions have a deep background in medical, but not much in legal argument. So they're placing a larger emphasis on the medical arguments in these applications. And so we're seeing a lot more end up at MSPB, where then the legal argument can come into play in front of a judge.
Yeah. So, not saying that they're necessarily wrong, but that it's just different. And that changes the approach to applying for federal disability retirement. And also just knowing how important that initial application is, and to get it right, to make sure that you have the right medical evidence, the necessary medical evidence in there to move your claim forward. So this is something that we're aware of, that we've adjusted for and are working on. And we want to make sure that you guys knew that, to make sure that you knew starting out that that piece of your application is very, very important. And so that gets us to our next update, which is a really big one, which is the MSPB now has a quorum and is working through a very extensive backlog. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. We went 5 years without a quorum at MSPB, which means that they could not issue any precedential decisions on appeals after an administrative judge had issued a decision on them. So what we're seeing now is they're making plans to work through this backlog, but you can still expect some pretty significant delays in those decisions. And it's also important to remember that MSPB handles a multitude of types of cases, so not just disability retirement appeals. So, we're looking at any type of employment dispute can make its way to MSPB. So they're working through tens of thousands of cases right now.
Yeah. So that's really big news. We're glad that those cases are finally moving forward. But that also goes back to what I was saying with making sure that your application's as solid as possible. So that's what we work with people on every day. So let's get into 2023.
Great.
We're seeing, a lot of this roll over into 2023, but just looking at what can we expect, federal disability retirement doesn't change a whole lot year to year, but small features of it, trends we can see do happen, and that's what we want to look at now. So let's look at the first thing, which is obviously the new OPM deputy director.
Yeah, so in December of 2022, the Senate confirmed Mr. Rob Shriver as the new deputy director at OPM. He's had experience with OPM previously, and so we can expect to see some focus on anything employment related, hiring, pay and leave, performance management, anything in that arena. He's looking to make some changes there. So far, it doesn't sound like anything too major, but we'll keep abreast of any changes that come up moving forward.
All right, yeah, so big changes for OPM in the future, potentially. Let's revisit the MSPB changes. Now we have a quorum. What's that going to look like this year?
So they do have a really big backlog to work through, but they're planning on hiring some support staff and looking to move through that backlog pretty quickly. They also expect to receive around 1,000 new petitions for review each year. But hopefully with the new support staff, full quorum, they can work through the backlog and keep up with the incoming cases.
That's great. So people that have been waiting for a really long time now have some hope that their case is going to move forward, right?
That's the hope. And,
Yep.
I know there are people that have been waiting for 5 whole years for a decision. So look to see some movement here within the next year.
Great. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is the 2023 timeline for applying, getting that initial decision, and potentially, how everything's finalized.
Sure. So historically, OPM's processing times have fluctuated dramatically depending on, who's making the decisions, how the applications are processed. Currently, we're seeing about a 6-month decision timeframe for an initial application. But where we've seen the biggest change and what is going to be happening in 2023 is the time between your decision and receiving an interim payment is going to be much longer than it was in the past. OPM has specifically said that it is going to take between 4 and 6 months for somebody who's been approved for disability retirement to receive their first interim payment, which is much longer than it has been. It's been about 6 to 8 weeks historically.
Yeah, and these times can change and vary all the time, like Anna said. And so if you're working with our office, make sure you reach out to your case manager to figure out, hey, what can I expect based on what's happening right now?
Yeah, our case managers have a really good idea of what processing times are at any given time, so they can give you the most up-to-date information.
So one thing I know that a lot of people are excited about is the new COLA adjustment. So this is the cost of living increase.
It's a 7.7% increase in your retirement annuity, and that is the largest COLA in almost 40 years. So that's going to make a big impact, especially with the cost of everything rising. It's intended to keep up with that.
Yeah, so what I want to make sure everyone hears Anna saying is that if you are on federal disability retirement currently and year 2 plus on that benefit, your annuity will increase because of this COLA adjustment. The other thing to think about is if you're working in the private sector, your old position's current salary will be increasing, which will also increase the amount that you can make in the private sector. So just keep those things in mind. So let's move on. CSRS employees. So talk to us about that, Anna.
So for those of you that aren't familiar, CSRS was the retirement system in place before FERS. What we're seeing now is far fewer CSRS employees are in the workforce. So as of 2020, they only made up 4% of the federal workforce. And what that means for disability retirement is just that if you are a CSRS employee, you've likely reached your minimum retirement age. So disability retirement may not be the best option for you.
So Anna, can you clarify that? That's kind of confusing.
Sure. So with disability retirement, if you are approved but you're eligible for a regular retirement, upon approval, you're just going to receive your regular retirement. So it's usually not beneficial to go through the disability retirement process if you are eligible for a regular retirement already.
That makes sense. And that's why we tell most people 62 is your limit, because that is when that comes into play.
Exactly.
Okay. Another really interesting thing that's going to be happening in 2023 is the Fair Retire Act.
Yeah, this is a big one. So a new law was passed at the end of last year, and it's intended to protect special provisions employees who are injured on the job. And what it does is it allows them to continue receiving their special provisions calculations, even if they move into a position that is no longer covered under special provisions. So they get a higher percentage for their retirement. Previously, before this law was passed, if they were injured and moved into a position that was not covered under special provisions, then they only received the 1 or 1.1% calculation at retirement. Now they'll be able to receive the 1.7% calculation no matter what type of position they're in.
Yeah, so that's really coming in play when you talk about special provisions employees that are looking, they can't keep doing that job and they need to get reassigned to a different job, correct? And in the past, they haven't been able to go into a non-special provisions position because they would lose out on these benefits. So that's kind of a new opportunity for people. Is it going to affect reassignments?
So at this point, we're still looking into it, but according to the actual law, it looks like there are going to be some really specific parameters in place for what kind of reassignments can be offered. And it's going to be at the agency's discretion mainly. So we will continue to look into this and see how it kind of plays out. But it looks like the reassignment parameters are going to remain the same as they would for disability retirement. And so it's really going to depend on, what your path to the future looks like, if you want to continue working or if you're eligible for a disability retirement.
Gotcha. So if you're a special provisions employee, this may apply to you if you're thinking about applying for federal disability retirement. It's something to think about and consider before you make any decisions. So I would highly recommend calling our office, talking to our team, as this is an emerging scenario that we're still learning more about and seeing how this is actually going to play out in the real world. All right, so a lot of you are probably thinking about applying this year. And if you are, this is what you need to know. We're going to start with the application prep because that's really the core of your federal disability retirement claim. So Anna, will you let us in on that a little bit?
Yeah, so building your application can be really complex. There are a lot of moving parts. It's really important to have the proper medical evidence, to have the legal arguments for disability retirement. But in addition to that, you're going to have to work with your agency to get some forms completed there. You have to write a statement that goes into your application. So these are all really important pieces that come together to kind of form your claim in the bigger picture.
Yeah. And part of that application is the next slide that we want to talk about, which is Social Security disability. A lot of you might not be aware of this, but while applying for federal disability retirement, you also have to apply for Social Security disability insurance. Now, you don't have to be approved for SSDI to be approved for federal disability, but you do have to apply, and it's something that people need to be aware of.
That's absolutely right. And you have to provide proof of your application for Social Security disability in your federal disability retirement application before you ever even submit it. And the reason that you're required to apply for Social Security disability is because in the event that you are approved, there's going to be an offset between your disability retirement and the Social Security disability.
Yeah, that's really, really important, and people need to understand that. We have webinars and resources just about that subject. So if you get on our website, you can find more about those. Okay, another really important one. We just talked about the medical record need when applying. Can you talk to us more about that?
Yes, so medical documentation is more important than ever. The medical specialists at OPM are putting a huge emphasis on your medical documentation. So, not only do you need medical records that show your treatment history and treatment plan, but you also really want your provider to say that you have issues doing your job. And that can be really difficult to get from a doctor who is unfamiliar with this benefit. It's critical at this point with the way OPM is making decisions to make sure that you have the strongest medical support and package put together.
And another important thing to remember here is that what we're helping you prove is that your medical condition is expected to last a minimum of 12 months, right?
That's correct. And that it's causing a service deficiency in your position. So you really need your medical documentation to relate to your job and why you cannot perform it any longer.
Yeah. Another thing I want to mention is at this point, if I get a bunch of medical records from my doctors, do I just want to dump all of those in my application?
Definitely not. What you want to do is make sure to go through those and make sure that what you're submitting is pertinent to your claim and the conditions that you're claiming, but also supportive. You don't want to send in medical evidence that is going to hurt you in the end.
Yes, I totally agree with Anna. The medical documentation is key. Knowing what to submit is key here. And that's what we help people with every day. We walk them through what's going to be supportive of your claim here and make sure that's what we're sending. And that takes experience and knowledge and having done this with over 8,000 federal employees now. It helps to know what is going to support your claim. Okay, the next piece we want to talk about is not necessarily applicable to everyone that's listening here, but if you've been separated, this is information you need to know.
Yes, so OPM has a very strict deadline. If you have been separated from service, you have 1 year from your date of separation to submit an application for disability retirement. There are almost no exceptions to this rule. So if you've been separated, you really need to be aware of what your separation date is. If you've been separated and you don't know what your date is, you should request an SF-50 from your agency. If you don't know if you've been separated, if you're on workers' compensation and you're not sure, contact your agency to verify. It's very important that you submit an application before this deadline, because if you don't, you're out of luck.
Yeah, we can't emphasize enough how strict this deadline is. Okay, the last piece we really want to talk about here, and it's an important one, is that what we are seeing now is the need for legal representation, right? We do see a lot of people apply for this on their own, and you're allowed to do that. And what we're seeing, though, is people that are getting in over their heads. There's so many documents to gather. You got to talk to your HR and gather documents from them. You have to fill out the application appropriately, know what medical records to submit after you've gotten them from your doctor. I'm not trying to make it sound scary or make a sales pitch, but this is something that's really important. There's a lot of money on the line for people. If we're talking about filing taxes, most people are going to file with the CPA because they want to make sure that they get everything right so that they don't owe the government anything. Well, in this scenario, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million, that people could gain from being approved for this. And it's just not something that you want to put on the line and go after alone, right? Just having the experience and expertise, a legal team that's ethically obliged to work on your behalf, right? It is so important here. One thing when we look at all of this that we need to keep in mind is once you make that first initial application, if there's mistakes on there, if you included the wrong medical evidence, all of those things, those are going to stick with your application as it goes into the denial process at reconsideration at MSPB. So making sure your initial application is rock solid is of the utmost importance.
That's exactly right. And I can't tell you how many times we've had somebody come to us that submitted their own initial application and made critical errors that basically set them up to not be approved for disability retirement at any appeal point. And it's really heartbreaking to see that.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, people are in tough situations, tough financial situations, or they're hurting at work, and we know how hard that is. I mean, we walk with people through that every day, and we know that this can be a really heavy subject, right? And during difficult times, right? And trying to take this on. And the biggest message we just want you to see is that we don't want you to risk your future. We're here to help you. We've done this many times. We've done it very successfully. We even offer a money back promise on our services. If we don't get you approved, we will give you your money back. We are very thankful to have been able to help so many people and impact so many lives and truly see lives changed, and people moving forward and taking the next step, and in some cases kind of starting over, so we're here for you. We want to help you. So I know most people are probably going to hear that as a sales pitch, but I really do want to say we are here for you. We want to take the weight off your shoulders, and help you be successful in this. All right, so now we've reached the end of the webinar, and just to recap real quick, the law has stayed the same. Federal disability retirement is the same, but the process evolves, OPM evolves, and things do change. So we just wanted to make you aware of those, and make sure that you understood how to set yourself up for success when applying and trying to build out your initial application. Like we said, we're here for you. We'd love to help you. Anna, thank you so much for just being here with us and just imparting your knowledge to everyone.
Yeah, Nick, I love doing this. I love being able to put this information out there for federal employees to make sure that they know what their options are. My parents have both been federal employees, so it's near and dear to my heart to be able to help these people.
So don't forget, if you're watching this video on YouTube, that you can leave questions in the comment section. Our team checks those daily and gets back to those as quickly as we can, and they will get you steered in the right direction. So with that, we thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time.